So I'd like to welcome you to the Adversity Advantage podcast, where we will help you use obstacles, failures, and setbacks to give you that edge needed for success. I'll be interviewing people from all walks of life on how they overcame trials and turned them into triumphs. So please sit back, relax, and get ready to be absolutely blown away by some of the wisdom and stories you're about to hear. Welcome back to another episode of the Adversity Advantage. I'm your host, Doug Bopst, and today's episode is really special because there's not many people that I would fly 3,000 miles across the country to interview. Today's guest is one of them because today's guest is a pioneer in the fitness space. And my guest today has one of the most powerful stories you will ever hear. One of the greatest American business stories there is. This guy escaped communism as a kid, came to America and went through every form of abuse as a child, had a treacherous childhood, and really built himself up from the bottom. And you're going to hear all about his incredible story today, as well as so many other life lessons that he has learned that you all will be able to implement into your life as soon as you're done hearing this episode. So my guest today is none other than Bedros Keuilian, who is the founder and CEO of Fit Body Bootcamp, which has been listed 3 times on Entrepreneur Magazine's 500 fastest growing franchises in the world. He's also the author of the Wall Street Journal bestseller Man Up, and known as the hidden genius behind many of the top businesses, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders. His list of clients include New York Times bestselling authors, celebrities, NFL athletes, Navy SEALs, and massive social influencers who turn to him when they want to create highly profitable brands and businesses. And I'm so excited to bring you today's episode because there's so many nuggets within Bedros' story, his experience as an entrepreneur, as a business leader. I mean, he has failed so many times along the way, and the wisdom he gains from every single failure that he is able to not only help himself, but help other people is life-changing. And, this episode, we're going to get real deep on his life experiences that can absolutely help so many of you right now, especially if you are going through a tough time and not sure about what the future holds. Bedros is really going to make us realize that everything happens for a reason. He talks about the power of therapy and addressing trauma in your life to prevent it from rotting you professionally and personally. We also talk about the power of mentorship and why it's important to have people around you that are kind of helping to guide you and you're leaning on when you need advice, you're looking to get a kick in the right direction. We also chat about why having a positive mental attitude is mandatory. It's not always easy, but mandatory, especially when we're going through times of adversity. Let's face it, not every situation in our life is going to be positive, right? Having to, beat an addiction or lose a bunch of weight or rediscover yourself, whatever it is, might not be positive, but you have to have a positive attitude in a way to go about it for you to be able to succeed, right? And, Bedros also talks about the importance of purpose, right? Purpose is a big word that gets thrown around these days. And he explains why we actually develop purpose as we live our life. We don't necessarily go and find it. And then he also talks about focusing on what's in front of us, like only really controlling what we can control, focusing on that. Because there's so many times in our life when we're going through uncertainty or adversity or stress where we put 95% of our thoughts, our actions, and our behaviors on the things that we can't control. And as a result, it takes away from what we can control in front of us. You're really going to get a lot of value out of this conversation with Bedros. So without further ado, let's welcome Bedros Keuilian to the Adversity Advantage podcast. Bedros, man, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate you being here, man. Appreciate the opportunity for being on your show.
Yeah, man. I mean, just studying you the last several weeks, there's so many parallels in our story. This show is called The Adversity Advantage. I know for you it's called The Immigrant Edge. But today, you are one of the greatest American business success stories there are. You got over 600 Fit Body Bootcamps. You're the CEO. You're the founder. You're the man that so many people whose podcast, people who are listening to this, are listening to, influencers, entrepreneurs go to for business advice. But what's even more incredible than all of this is how you got here. It's like you're the ultimate capitalist today, but you came from communism. So give the listeners or people who are watching this a little bit of a backstory on how you grew up, what it was like to come from a communist country, escape from Armenia, and kind of where it led you and how you got into fitness.
Yeah, man. First off, your listeners ought to know that you and I were just shooting the shit for about 7-8 minutes. And that took me down a long path of like, holy crap, yeah, I could have been in jail had this one thing not happened. And it's so funny. It's, well, it's not funny, but it's funny how life unfolds, because there's whatever situation happened that led you to jail. I got lucky during a particular police helicopter chase, and I didn't end up in jail because they weren't able to identify me, just the guys that I was driving away from or with. I was the getaway driver. But I was in a deep thought as you were talking about that, because I'm like, my life could be very different. But then what's really cool about the United States is it could have brought me right back to where I am. You know, kind of what you were talking about. You start surrounding yourself with different people. But anyway, so I'm a foreigner, man. I'm an immigrant to the United States. I come from a communist country, Armenia. At the time, it was under Soviet rule. And imagine the Cold War that was happening between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. And when you're from Armenia, you're part of the Soviet Union. My dad was a member of the communist country, but he was a capitalist. And he was the most westernized communist on the planet, probably. I remember him wearing Levi's and Jordache jeans in Armenia. He had Ray-Ban glasses, sunglasses. He had like Adidas shoes. He listened to the Beach Boys and Elvis. And he would obviously get all that stuff from the black market, because there's no way any kind of American influence is coming into the Soviet Union legally. And he decided that he was going to save up money, and he bribed some Soviet authorities, and we escaped. He made it look like we were just taking a family vacation to Italy. And the reason it was Italy is Italy in the 80s was a communist sympathizer, so it made sense that we would take a vacation to Italy. If we said, hey, we're taking a vacation to the United States, they'd be like, no way, you're not leaving. And we escaped the Soviet Union into Italy. When we got to Italy, we went to the American consulate, and it took about 10 days for us to get all of our paperwork right and legally enter the United States. And the reason I say that piece is because my dad had to literally say, look, I'm a member of the Communist Party. I didn't want to be a member, but I had no choice. Whatever information you want about communism, I'll gladly share it with you guys. And we entered as political refugees. And so when we came to the United States, I was 6 years old. And I want you to imagine this. I want you to imagine from the first memories you have around 3 or 4 years old to 6 years old, your parents are doing well financially in the country you're in my case, Soviet Union and Armenia, because my dad being a member of the Communist Party, he did really well. I would eat caviar and have hot tea and in the morning with like, you know, fresh bread. And my dad did well for himself, but he didn't like and agree with the communist way of living. And so he's like, even though we're some of the people doing the best, we need to leave this joint. And so he did that, and all of a sudden we come here, and I'm the 6-year-old kid who's broke, doesn't speak English, doesn't understand the culture. There's no caviar, there's no fresh French bread and hot tea. We're living in Section 8 housing. I'm getting picked on and bullied by the neighborhood kids. We're eating out of dumpsters that we find in the back of grocery stores where they throw away food that's kind of expired. Some of the food has gone bad, but you can kind of pick off the mold. And people don't realize this, you can find a head of lettuce that's gone bad, and if you peel away enough leaves, there's a fresh head of lettuce somewhere in there. Could be a tiny little golf ball of a lettuce, but it's in there. And so that's kind of how we made do, man. My dad worked at a gas station pumping gas, at a pizzeria wiping tables down, and delivering newspapers at 2 in the morning. And man, it was bananas growing up, because there was more adversity in my life then than I even knew what to do with. But as I look back now as a 46-year-old man and CEO, Fit Body Bootcamp, an international franchise and software company, supplement company, and coaching programs, and I've coached Navy SEALs and Super Bowl winning NFL athletes, and some of the top thought leaders that everyone's probably following have been my clients. I'm like, that adversity that I dealt with as a kid was literally the foundation of which how I built myself and how I coach my coaching clients. Most things can be solved if you have enough adversity tolerance in your life. And that's literally the foundation of my coaching program.
Yeah, it's so interesting, man, because I think so many people run away from adversity. I think so many people try to push it to the side and they say, you know what, I'm going to get rid of this as fast as possible. I'm going to turn to drugs. I'm going to turn to alcohol, sex, money, victim mentality. And all that ends up doing is prolonging the problem, like kicking the ball even further down the street, right?
Sure.
And I think this golf ball sized problem, which is the adversity, becomes this big bowling ball by the way we deal with it, right? And so I know part of your, mentality, growing up, or part of your mentality now was shaped by the kind of the way you grew up. You built up this adversity tolerance for all the crap you've had to deal with, including like starting Fit Body Boot Camp. So, for those of you who don't know what Fit Body Boot Camp is, if you're not in the fitness industry or you haven't been following Bedros, it was the OG of group training. Before Orange Theory, before F45, he was like the pioneer in group training. He's a pioneer of also, if you've heard of mastermind groups and mentorships, people who have masterminds today came to Bedros to figure out how to start theirs. So just to give you guys some context on what this guy has started, and he's made real money, he's had real success, there's no fake cars, there's no fake jets, he's as real as they come, but it started with fitness, right? So take it back to the days of starting Fit Body Boot Camp. Your story with starting it actually reminds me of that. Did you ever read that book Shoe Dog about Phil Knight?
Yes,
Nike?
yeah.
There's so many similarities, I feel like, with you guys almost being sued for all that money and everything, but take us back a little bit.
Oh my God, dude. It's I never saw the correlation until you just said it. And actually my son, who's 15 years old now, is reading Shoe Dog and loves it. I became a personal trainer because I was a fat kid going through elementary school, junior high, and high school. Senior year of high school, or that summer before senior year, I decided to work out and get in shape, and because I wanted to go to prom with this girl named Nakaya, and I figured, well, if I'm in great shape, I've got a better chance of getting the yes when I ask her.
Right.
So I was like, holy crap, my life changed. I lost 30 pounds senior year of high school. I've got more confidence. Kids are starting to notice me. Even Nakaya was noticing me. I didn't have the confidence to ask her out, so I never made it to the prom with her, but the way my body changed, Doug, I was like, this is what I want to do for a living. I want to be a personal trainer. And I worked in a big box gym as a personal trainer, but I didn't know how to sell myself. Right. So unless you were like hell-bent on, I'm going to go to LA Fitness in La Habra and find a personal trainer and buy sessions from him, I wasn't about to sell you anything. Like I was an order taker.
Right.
And you can't take enough orders to sustain a living. So I worked as a personal trainer, and I worked as a fry cook at Disneyland, and I worked as a bouncer at a bar. But one day, one of my personal training clients was like, dude, you can do this on your own. Like, you can have your own gym. You don't have to work in a big box gym. You can have your own personal training studio. And I'm like, cool, show me, teach me how. So long story short, he kind of started to mentor me. So that was my first exposure to mentors.
This guy was Jim, right?
Jim Franco.
Yeah, Jim Franco.
Yeah, and he was my first exposure to a mentor, and back then I didn't realize that. It's only in hindsight that you look back, you're like, this guy was mentoring me. Holy cow, he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, right? And that kind of resonated with the story of what you told me before the cameras went on, where you're in jail and it's like, woe is me, I'm the victim, and your jail cell guy, partnered, what do they call it?
Cellmate.
Cellmate, is like, hey man, you could either go keep pissing and moaning, or you could like hit the deck and do some push-ups and take ownership of your life.
Exactly.
And those 90 days were a pivotal kind of a life transformation moment for you. And Jim was that guy. So whatever that guy saw in you, Jim saw something in me. And sometimes we need that, man. We need others to believe in us before we can believe in ourselves. And the right people will do that. I ended up starting Fit Body Boot Camp after a series of owning my own gyms, selling them, coaching and consulting the personal training industry. And then in 2008, when the housing market crashes, I'm like, man, no one wants to work with a personal trainer right now. Personal trainers are so expensive, $600 to $1,200 a month to work one-on-one with the trainer. And all these personal trainers who are my coaching clients are like, dude, I'm losing clients left and right. I'm like, well, do you offer boot camps? They're like, yeah, I do, but it's winter time right now where I live and I can't do outdoor boot camps. I'm thinking, I bet we can bring this outdoor boot camp, bring it indoors, and do one-on-many. And if we can do one-on-many training instead of one-on-one, we can now make personal training more affordable and more convenient. And those are the two things Mrs. Jones is looking for, affordability and convenience. And so I wasn't 100% sure yet, so I was like, all right, I'm going to test it on my own before I make this thing a franchise and whatever. But the economy crashed, 11.5% unemployment rate. No one is starting new businesses, and this knucklehead in 2010 is like, I'm starting a fitness franchise. And I did, and by 2012, I was franchised, and we were still in the depths of the economic, crisis. And 2013, the country started to kind of come out of it. But dude, the learning curves were massive. Doug, the learning curves were massive because there is no school for franchising. There is no mentor to hire who is a franchise expert. Today there are.
Right.
Back then there wasn't. And so I realized very quickly that you have to learn just by falling and getting back up. And that's what I did, and went through a series of potential lawsuits. I had one employee who literally cost me $640,000, got me into $640,000 debt because of a string of bad decisions on my part, not hers. It was my fault for keeping her that long, for not listening to my gut. How often do our gut tells us something and we're like, shut up.
Yeah, I know, and then we don't listen to it, and then we 7 months later, we're like, gosh, why didn't I listen to our gut,
Right.
Yeah, trust me.
And instead, we deal with the anxiety that it promotes, right?
Exactly.
And so I remember being so anxious, like, okay, I think this thing is happening. I don't want to address it because it's going to create conflict. So I'm going to ignore it. And in the process of ignoring it, you're anxious, you're on edge, you can't sleep at night. So I'm like, what helped me sleep? Oh yeah, when I tore my bicep, I got Vicodin, and I still have some left. So I started taking Vicodin and taking NyQuil to fall asleep. And you start making a string of bad decisions to cope with things that you should be addressing. But man, we started Fit Body Bootcamp, and it was a rocky, shitty start. And by 2013, 14, we thought we were about to end it all as far as let the company crash. And by 2015, because I read a book in 2014 that Howard Stern recommended, a book about Navy SEALs and their exploits during the Black Hawk Down era in Africa, Mogadishu, it completely changed my perspective. I learned leadership for the first time. I thought leadership was, it says CEO on the corporate paperwork, therefore I'm the leader. That just meant I'm responsible for everything.
Yeah.
Leadership is a very different thing. It's not just managing people, it's leading them to an outcome. And I had a long list of leadership lessons to learn. And I spent the next 2 years, 2014, 2015, reading and applying leadership into my business. And literally over the next 3 years, everything changed, and we just had this hockey stick era. And there we are.
Yeah, man, and I remember you talking about that guy, Jim Franco, who was kind of like that unsung hero in your life. I think sometimes, I know you've had the fortune of having so many, well-known people either you've coached or have coached you through the years. I can say the same for myself as well, but for me, my cellmate, and for you, it seems like this guy, Jim, was the guy that was the catalyst for getting everything started, and then looking back and believing in the power of mentorship and the believing of having in the power and believing to have, somebody there alongside of you when you didn't believe in yourself. And then you lead, that leads into you starting Fit Body Bootcamp. You grow it, you kind of franchise it, and you think you're, living high, right? But I think one of the things that happened to me in my story is I got out of jail. I was clean from drugs. About 5 years in, I'm making great money as a trainer. I'm ripped. I had written my first book. I thought I had my life all together. But there was something missing in my life. I was spiritually still broken. I had so much shame about my past. There was still trauma I had dealt with, my childhood. I was still mad at the world for the abuse. I was still mad at the world for being bullied. I still didn't understand the effect of all the abuse I went through had on me as an adult. And I got to this point where I literally came to my knees. And for me, I ended up becoming a Christian as a result of that and believing in something greater than me because I needed a sense of purpose and meaning. I believed until that moment, it was 2014, 2015, that life was just about Doug Bopst. And then I did everything for me. It was all about me and my body, my business, me, and look at me and how good I am with my transformation. And it brought me to my knees. And I know for you, you hit a similar path, right, in your life where, funny thing is, and you'll appreciate this, I was at this point, so overworked as a trainer. I was trying to compete in a physique competition. I'm burning out. I started getting crazy anxiety attacks, right? I'm on the rower with a buddy of mine down at the gym, and my heart rate gets to 200. I'm wearing one of those Under Armour that come out with these heart rate monitors back in the day. Yeah. And I start freaking out. I get all loopy, and I thought I was dying. And I was like, what the heck? I'm as fit as can be. I hadn't had a panic attack since I was on drugs. I was like, what's going on? End up going to my doctor, after a few days of saying I'm fine. And I was like, I literally think there's something wrong with my heart. So he's like, you're fine. You're a trainer. You're like 25, 26 years old, whatever I was at the time. There's nothing wrong with your heart. And so he's like, fine, go see this cardiologist, right? So he sends me to go see a cardiologist, gives me the referral. He looks at me and he's like, where's your like grandfather? Like, where's your grandmother? Like, who are you here with? And I'm like, myself. He's like, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, I'm a trainer. He's like, what are you doing here? And I ran on that stress test treadmill for 20 minutes. He's like, I've never seen anybody run this fast. And I remember him like putting me down, doing the recovery test and saying, dude, your heart's fine. You just have anxiety. And from that moment, I made some massive changes. I cut back on the hours I worked. I started going back to therapy. I started unpacking a lot of the stuff too, and then getting like really spiritual. And for you, you hit a very similar moment too, right? And people see you now, right? And they might not know this part about you because I know you don't talk about it as much as the business and the entrepreneurship. So what happened? We will get you back to this episode of The Adversity Advantage in just 1 second. But first, wanted to let you know that this podcast is brought to you by Danette May and Mindful Health LLC, featuring Golden Superfood Bliss, a product from her Earth Echo Foods line. Imagine drinking a rich and creamy elixir loaded with goodness and sweet enough to satisfy any sweet tooth. This blend is focused around turmeric, a potent spice that's perfect for supporting a healthy inflammatory response, helping you shed stubborn pounds, improving digestion, and supporting your mental health. Then it's blended with black pepper, coconut milk, MCT oil, amla fruit, cinnamon bark, ginger root, ashwagandha, and a unique blend of mushrooms including reishi, shiitake, maitake, and lion's mane. Ever tried golden milk? It pales in comparison to this. It's truly indulgent. Golden Superfood Bliss will help to elevate your well-being and prepare you to take on the world and live your best life. Not only that, it is friendly to paleo, gluten-free, keto, vegan, and vegetarian diets. For the last 8 years, they have been a leader in the superfoods market and are proud to have served millions of customers worldwide. So go to earthechofoods.com/Doug Bopst. Again, it's earthechofoods.com/Doug Bopst to learn more about the amazing benefits of Golden Superfood Bliss. And when you enter in the promo code Doug at checkout, you'll get 15% off. Now back to the show.
Well, for me, I think it was right around that time when I realized I was a failure as a leader, number one. I wasn't having conversations I should be having. And one day I went up into my guest house to grab a pair of shoes that I had left up there the night before. And as I bent down to pick my shoes up, dude, I don't know what else to describe it as other than my instincts were like, dude, you're having a heart attack. Now, right. I was 37 years old then. And so one part of my brain is like, all right, man, you work in the fitness industry, you know enough about the human body where it's unlikely it's a heart attack. But at the same time, I'm having tunnel vision, my heart's racing, right. Both of my arms are tingling. And if you remember, they talk about like when someone's having a heart attack, I forget if it's the left or the right arm hurts. Yeah. I'm like, shit, both of them hurt. You know, this must be the big one, right? And so for me, I'm like, this is it. This is how I go. And I'm sweating, and I could hear the thug lug in my ear of my heart just beating. I'm like, what the hell? And in that moment, all I could think about was, who's going to walk Chloe down the aisle, my daughter, when she's older and gets married? Who's going to teach my son Andrew to be a modern day knight? And I made a promise to my wife that I would protect her, who's going to be there to protect her. And so I was just disappointed in myself. I'm like, if I'm dying right now, I've let the three people in my life that matter the most down. Right. And so as I stepped out of my guest house, my goal was just, let me get some fresh air. Let me see if my body changes. And I don't know if it was the fresh air, the movement. Something started to calm down enough where I was like able to gather myself. I'm like, all right, I either just dodged a bullet, a heart attack bullet, or there's something else going on. And the next day I was in the doctor's office, very similar to your story. And like, dude, you are fit as a fiddle. Your problem is you're stressed. And before I could say, no, I'm not, my wife's like, yes, he is, right? Some part of you wants to say, no, I'm not, I'm fine, I could keep plowing through. And the reality is, you can't. Right. Because at that point, again, I was on the Vicodin, I was on the NyQuil to fall asleep, and in the mornings I drink coffee and pre-workout and take Adderall to kind of get focused and energized again. And so I was using a mixture of all types of cocktails to regulate my energy. And anytime you're doing that and you're not having the conversations that you should and the dialogue that you should and not taking the action that you should, it all kind of, use the word unpacking. Yeah. Imagine taking a plastic bag, and just stuffing it with shit. At some point it's gonna burst. You better unpack that thing and bring it down to normal. And we don't unpack things. We keep it all inside and we suffer in silence. And that's exactly what I did. And boom, it hit me with a massive panic attack. And it wasn't until I worked with a therapist, Kevin Downing, out here in Brea for 16 months, once a week for 16 months, every Monday. Yeah. And I went in there to talk to him about my panic attack. Like, dude, the doctor gave me Xanax and I'm drooling at the side of my mouth and I just feel slow. I can't process. I can't take Xanax and run a business. And so I told my doctor, Xanax isn't going to work for me, man. I need to be sharp. He goes, well, you're going to have to go talk to a therapist. So reluctantly, I found this therapist and I'm explaining the whole thing to him. He's like, oh, great. In 3-4 weeks, I'll give you some tools and you'll be fine. I'm like, cool. That fucking thing lasted 16 months, that experience with him, because in 3-4 weeks, he's right. He did help me overcome my anxieties. He taught me several things. Halt. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. When you're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, halt. I always tell people now, I go, are you halting? I'm like, what do you mean? Are you hungry, angry, lonely, tired? Well, yeah, I'm lonely. Okay, that's probably why you're anxious or you're angry or depressed or you're feeling like you want to hit the bottle. The alcoholic will go back to alcohol when they're hungry, angry, lonely, tired. The drug addict will go back to drugs when they're hungry, angry, lonely, tired. I will go back to eating excessive amounts of calories because food gives me comfort.
Right.
And then I start feeling bad about it, and then I start beating myself up. And so whatever your vice is, when you're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, you're going to go deep into that vice. Pornography, infidelity, whatever. And so he taught me that. He taught me that anxiety is anticipation of future pain. So if you're anxious, deal with the stuff that you ought to deal with instead of kicking that can down the road, as we talked about earlier. When you do, that just golf ball becomes a bowling ball, right? The $340,000 debt that team member employee put me in probably could have been stopped at a $50,000 debt had I addressed it early on. But I didn't want to cause waves, and I was a people pleaser, and I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and I was afraid that if I lose her, I can't replace her. And that comes from a lack of self-worth and self-value, because I don't feel like who's going to want to work with me and for me, right? So there's a lot of things to unpack, speaking of unpack. But all this to tell you that, what I thought was going to be a 3 or 4 week thing ended up being a much longer process. While he taught me halt, he taught me anxiety is anticipation of future pain. He also taught me that action alleviates anxiety, is in do something about your shit, and you won't have that anxiety. It like on the 4th session, as I'm leaving, he goes, so Bedros, is there anything else we need to talk about before you kind of leave here for your last session? I'm like, Kevin, I'm good, man. Like you helped me. I'm a fixed man, You gave me all the tools I need. And so as I'm literally standing in the threshold of his office door, he goes, well, what about things with your family, right? With your parents? I'm like, everything was fine with my parents. I come from communist parents, and so they slapped me around a little bit.
He's like, whoa, yeah.
Right? Yeah. And that was, he's like, that's not normal. Anything else that happened? I was like, well, some other shit happened. And that's when all the real trauma conversations started to come up. And that's where most of the 16 months with Kevin took place. And I realized how much shame, rage, confusion I was carrying. And it bled into my relationship. It bled into my work. It bled into my business, my friendships, my health, self-worth.
Yeah.
And that time with Kevin Downing, 16 months, was probably the most healing period of my life.
Yeah, and you talk about now leadership, and you right now are the epitome of a great leader, right? Based on the way you treat your employees. I mean, just even walking in here and how I'm treated, I can just tell that you lead well. And it's funny now, it's actually surprised me that now it's like you encourage people to go, or have encouraged people to see Kevin on their own, right?
Yeah.
You've even helped people that want to get started in it, all because you made a transformation within yourself and decided to be like, you know what, like, I'm being a shitty leader right now, I'm being a shitty person, I need to look myself in the mirror, man up. And by the way, like, man up, you don't have to be a man to man up, it's just like human up, like
human up.
Take control of your life. Quit being a victim. Know that, the moment you relinquish control to your family, your friends, the government, somebody else, like, you lose because you're waiting for somebody else to change your life rather than actually putting one foot in front of the other and doing what's necessary to change your own. But the fascinating thing is you made this massive transformation with your leadership skills, and it all started with like healing the trauma. So like, what were some of the stuff you changed in your own life that kind of help you unpack that, so that maybe somebody, because right now we're in this pandemic, suicide's up, alcoholism's up, addiction's up, and people are struggling with their mental health. So what were some of the things that you did looking back that were like, you know what, like these, 2 or 3 things were things that really shifted my mental health?
So, for me, structure. I was a person that didn't have much structure. And because I'm OCD, because I'm ADD, I have work ethic.
Yeah.
And I was able to build a business off just sheer grit and work ethic. But you can white knuckle it for so long. I don't know if you've ever done jujitsu.
I haven't, but I was talking to, Ryan Mickler.
Yes.
So I was speaking with him yesterday, and he was telling me how much jiu-jitsu has helped him as well. So I was like, man, I got to try it.
Dude, it is one of the, and everyone will tell you, it's a humbling sport. It's a humbling sport. And you only realize it when you first start out. And my coach, his name is Peter Sutton, we trained 3 times, at the time when I was going through my 6-week challenge with him, it was 3 times a week. I weigh 230 pounds, and I'm 6 feet tall. He's 5'11", and about 170. For all intents and purposes, I should be able to muscle him off of me. The guy was just so good at using leverage and my own weight that I would have you. If you can only muscle for so long, and you're just exhausted, and then he just gets you in an arm bar and you tap out.
Yeah.
Right. And so, white knuckling through, or using just grit and work ethic through anything, is only going to take you so far. Structure, discipline, productivity, morning routine. I lacked all of that.
Wow.
I would hit the snooze button. I would hit the snooze button. I would hit the snooze button. Finally, at 7 a.m., I've hit the snooze button a half a dozen times. And by this point, I'm behind on a few things. So I'm like, well, I planned on eating healthy, but now I'm just going to have this protein bar, which, look, folks, a protein bar is better than a Snickers bar, but it's not that much better than a Snickers. It's a fucking Snickers bar with a little bit of protein in it. And so really, when you think about it, now I've broken a promise to myself. I told myself that I'd wake up at 5 in the morning. Now it's 7 in the morning that I'm waking up. I told myself that I would eat a healthy breakfast, and I didn't. Instead, I'm sucking down extra coffee and a protein bar. And my workout was going to be 90 minutes long and have mobility and flexibility in it. And now it's like barely 40 minutes long because I got to get to the HQ. And so a string of promise breakings to yourself leads to losing confidence and credibility with yourself. The moment you lose confidence and credibility with yourself, it's over. So some of the things that I learned, not only through Kevin, but also from my dear friend and business partner, Craig Ballantyne, is that morning routine, the non-negotiables, what things to add to my plate, what behaviors, habits, routines, beliefs, what things to take off your plate. And once I did that, it was crazy how I had more time to myself, was more productive, didn't have to work till 1 a.m. Like, how easy is it to just commit to yourself, I'm going to watch 1 episode with my wife of whatever it is we're watching, and not 6 episodes.
Right.
I mean, when you look at Netflix and Amazon, they are designed to get you to binge watch.
Yeah.
As soon as one episode ends, the other one starts in 3, 2, 1, and you see it, right? And so if you're not disciplined to hit that goddamn button, it will suck you in for another 42 minutes. And then another 42 minutes. And then somewhere you're going to have to pay the piper somewhere. Either through quality of work or through time. And so that's what I was doing. But really, discipline, structure, routine were the 3 things that were missing out of my life. And look, it's not an overnight. Like, if someone's like, hey, how do I install all of that by tomorrow? You don't. Like, do one thing. Just wake up 30 minutes earlier and, just drink 30 ounces of water when you wake up. And if you could do that for the next 2 weeks, add one more thing. Right? It might be, whatever, doing a brain dump the night before you go to bed. Do a brain dump on the things you need to work on in the mornings. I do that all the time so that things aren't swirling around in my head, keeping me awake. I've got a list. I call it my GSD list, my get shit done list. I have that. I wake up. I don't hit the snooze button. I drink my 30 ounces of water. I go through my little morning shower and comb my hair and brush my teeth, and I'm downstairs going through my GSD list. It makes sense. I'm not, going through my social media and checking in on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and then email, and then what happens? We get stuck in that loop. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, email, and you can kill 40 minutes just going through that loop. And I'm not Mark Zuckerberg. I'm not getting paid for doing that. So why am I doing it? Because I don't have a structure, and in the lack of structure, we begin to kind of go by the seat of our pants. And that's where we get sucked into, shitty behavior.
Yeah, it's funny, man. I heard, you were talking, I think it was a Genius Network, maybe it was a few years ago, and you brought up the point You have all these entrepreneurs, all these people that are looking to scale their business, grow their business, learn how to market this, get something from you on like business. And I remember you saying, like, you were like, how many of you have experienced abuse or trauma or something? You posed a question like that to the audience, and you said, well, I don't remember the exact number, 1 in 4, 1 in 5, whatever it was. And I think it's so important to bring that up because without you doing the work on yourself, you wouldn't be the leader you are today. Without doing the work on yourself and taking care of your health, taking care of your relationship with your wife, doing the necessary things for you to make that structure, to do the morning routine, the evening routine, bookending your days so you're having like your energy on point, you wouldn't be able to make the decisions that you are forced to make sometimes in today's world. And one of the things I notice is that you're the king of being decisive and just move. It was funny, you know, your camera guy and I before were talking about like, man, like I've never seen anyone move like Bedros. Like when shit hits the fan, you're like, okay, what's next? What am I going to do about it? Decision. What kind of pivots did you make during the pandemic?
When you look at someone who's got a big business, if you've got a big franchise and a big franchise headquarters, and I need all these people upstairs to help my franchisees, that's all great when the money's flowing in. When the money stops, because some governors say, all the governors say we're shutting down gyms, and now gyms aren't, your franchise gyms aren't making money, and they don't want to pay your franchise royalty fees, and all of a sudden, but you still have payroll to pay, you still have mortgage to pay on this building, you still have liability insurance to pay, you have taxes to pay, health insurance, 401ks, all this stuff. All of a sudden, you start hemorrhaging when money's still going out but not coming in. The businesses are like, oh, hey, we're cool. Are not the big businesses that were making all that money. Because when you're making a lot of money, you also have a lot of expenses. The goal is to make more money than the expenses, but it's typically a thin sliver for a lot of businesses. Is to open up that gap is what we try and do. It's a small business that only have like 2 employees and they're, very thin and scrappy. And they're like, oh, okay, the COVID came? All right. Hey, are you okay with living with 50% less money? Yeah, so am I. Great. We're just going to suck it up, buttercup, and move in with our parents. And so a startup is not going to suffer as much as an established business, right? And that's what we saw is a lot of big established businesses. Hertz, 24-Hour Fitness, Soup Plantation, like you name the industry from food to hotel to fitness, automotive, like, dude, they were just folding left. Disneyland yesterday announced 28,000 employees just got laid off yesterday. The bigger you are, the faster you have to pivot because the hemorrhage continues of money while the decline of money happens very quickly. So I was like, all right, I come from a communist world where you don't trust anybody in leadership. So our leadership says, that's it, right? Our leadership says in 2 weeks, we'll be back in business.
By Easter, right?
By Easter, by Easter, we'll be back in business. And look, man, I don't care if you believe in Trump or Biden, that this is not the issue here. The issue is whoever the leadership is, they mean well, and leadership's job for the most part in politics is to sell hope. They're not always accurate. Their job is to sell hope. And so we'll be back in business in 2 weeks. So all the people that took I'll just wait. I can survive for 2 weeks. Hell, I can survive for 4 weeks. I'm good. And everyone that took the wait and see approach is dying or dead right now. I was like, great. I'm going to do the Ronald Reagan thing. I'm going to trust but verify. I'm going to trust that we're going to reopen in 2 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, but I'm going to verify my survival by pivoting in 2 days to online coaching. And we went to Zoom training, Facebook private groups for all the locations. Hey, put your clients in a Facebook group, interact. Remember, your clients still need results. If the immune system is weak, you're going to get the COVID faster. So our pitch changed to our clients. We launched a 28-day Stronger Together challenge, which was 28 days for $28 of online coaching. And we started to gain more clients online. Now, profits went down for all of our locations because now we're selling 28 days for $28 instead of $149 a month for a Fit Body Bootcamp membership. But the beautiful thing was I was able to keep my franchisees busy. I was able to keep them active with positivity versus like hand-wringing, like what do we do? And so that pivot took 48 hours for us to do, only because I was in a sheer state of panic. Because coming from a country where you can't trust the government, I just assumed it was going to be a longer lasting pandemic, and I happened to be right.
Yeah, and I think there's so much to be said by keeping the people busy, because I think when people stop working and doing what they love, right, because most people get into training because of passion to help other people change lives, right? So when they stop doing that, right, they almost lose a sense of themselves and become dead inside. I remember the days when I first started training and I would train 10-hour days, the days where like I would have a bunch of cancels. I'd be like a little bit more depressed because I felt like that was part of my identity was to help people, right? And I think the other thing too that's very
worth hitting home on again is that you take a situation, you're like, all right, well, what am I going to do about it? I can sit here with my thumb up my butt and wait for the government to make a decision, wait for a paycheck from the government, wait for COVID to pass, whatever it is. What can I control right now, right? What can I do right now? Can I continue to take care of myself? How can I train people? Can I train them online? How can I start a coaching program? For me, I made one of the biggest investments in my business as COVID's starting. And I remember just being like, gosh, what timing. But I was like, maybe this happened for me and not to me to pivot more into online. I went ham on my podcast and really putting a lot of work into that because, all right, I can train my clients online. And then with the other time that I have, I can control my podcast. The government can't shut down my podcast. I'm going to leverage my relationship capital and really create momentum in my own podcast. Ended up landing my first sponsor in the first few months. Landed some big guests on my show that inspired me, and I started to see momentum with that, and that kept me inspired, right? Because if I hadn't had that to fall back on, who knows what would have happened. I think that's what it's all about, is not only having some sense of meaning and purpose in your life when things don't go your way to keep you motivated, but having a community of people, which I know you were incredibly passionate about too. It's surrounding yourself with fighter jets and not crop dusters, right? So for me, it's I always see that as you got to surround yourself with people that challenge, love, and support you unconditionally to be the best version of yourself. So I think a lot of people that are struggling right now are the crop dusters, are the ones that are saying, woe is me. They're pessimistic. They're blaming this person, blaming that person. They're saying, you know what, I'll just take a vacation and wait for somebody to do something for me. And then when I see other people have success, I'm going to hate on them. Right, but the fighter pilots are the ones that just keep going no matter what, no matter how many times they lose in business, no matter how many times they lose in life, they get back up. So talk a bit about that mentality for you and how it's relevant to every single human being right now.
Before we physically die, we tend to mentally die first.
Yeah.
And a great example of that, I was reading some books on just historical wars, and when I was reading ones about Vietnam War, these pilots that were shot down, American pilots that were shot down and held as prisoners of war in Vietnam by North Vietnam. They were literally put in huts with cages around them, or sometimes in big holes that were dug deep and with just a roof that they couldn't get out of. The ones who were under the impression that, hey, by the time Christmas comes, I'll be rescued. By the time summer comes, I'll be rescued. By the time my birthday comes, I'll be rescued. Christmas came, summer came, their birthday came, and they weren't rescued. They lose hope.
Yeah.
They die up here first, and then they started to wither away and die. They gave up.
Yeah.
The ones who decided that, all right, the Hanoi Hilton is now my home.
Yeah.
And they started to, one guy pulled the button off his shirt, and at night he would just flick the button and then search for it and find it. Okay, that's one. Flick the button, search for it and find it. That's two. And he created a routine. He kept his mind working mathematically, busy. Kept his body working physically, push-ups, burpees, whatever it is that he can do in that small little 5x5 space that he had. And in that way, just said, this is home for me. I'm going to make the best of it. And they're the ones that survived. And once they were freed, they thrived in life.
Wow.
The former, I think he died, but the former governor of Arizona, I forget his name now.
John McCain?
John McCain, thank you. Great example. That guy was a POW, and the guy comes out and just becomes this amazing dude, right?
Right.
So I share this with you because you have to stay in a place of positivity. Number one, a positive mental attitude is mandatory. I didn't know if the 28-day Stronger Together challenge was going to work, Doug. What I did know is if I keep my franchisees and their coaches focused on a new online coaching program we're launching, that's a positive thing.
Yeah.
Versus I could either keep them focused on that, or I can keep them focused on we hate the government, and how dare they do this to us, and is this COVID really from China, or is it a Russian attack, or who gives a shit? I don't know where it's from, what it's doing, how long it's going to last. Let's focus on what we can focus on and only go down that path, and that's what we did. Thankfully, the 28-day transformation challenge worked, but even if it didn't, I was just going to create another one and keep them positively busy instead of focusing on negativity. And that's a very important piece, because the moment we die mentally, we die physically. So crop dusters tend to blame others. The cup is always half empty, not half full. They're fixed-minded, and they want to kind of take that role of the victim. And then you look at fighter jets, These are people that are problem solvers. Their cup is always half full, not half empty. They are open-minded or growth-minded, and they're really looking to serve. They come from a place of service versus what's in it for me. And one of the things I often talk about is every morning when we wake up, we have one of two shirts we can put on. You can put on the shirt, not obviously, a metaphor, obviously, you're not wearing two shirts, but one shirt says, what can you do for me today?
Yeah.
The other shirt says, how can I serve you today? You put on the shirt that says, how can I serve you today? You're going to have more things work out in your favor because there's this universal law that seems to reward people who show up by way of service versus by way of greed.
Yeah, and I think, it's kind of all come back full circle for you because I know you all do a lot for kids, for underprivileged kids around Christmas time to get them toys and have raised tons and tons of money for that. And, I think purpose is one of those things that comes in time. Like I see so much in your story like I do in mine that like you don't just find your purpose. You have to kind of develop it like you say in your book.
Yeah.
And, one of the other things I wanted to allude to is you talk about your change in perspective and knowing that if you focus on the other, you know where that gets you, right? Like, if you focus on the negative, you're going to go down this rabbit hole of negativity. I remember Tom interviewing, when he was interviewing me on Impact Theory, he's like, how did you change your mindset and transform when you got out of jail to saying you were never going to use drugs again? He's like, how'd you do it? And I remember just like thinking, I was like, honestly, like the only thing I had to do is it was blind faith. Like I believed in myself just a little bit. I really had no grounds to actually really believe in myself because I'd failed up until that point. I had 21 jobs by the time I was 20 years old. I had been a drug addict, most of my life. I had, lied and cheated the system and all these things. I had no reason to really believe in myself, but I knew if I could just focus every single day on working out, on eating healthy, on making sure I stopped hanging around certain people, on being a good human being and being of service to others, it gave me a chance. No guarantee, but it gave me a chance. Versus if I had said, you know what, like I'm not going to make it, I probably would have gone back and done drugs again. I would have gone job to job, and I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you, and I would have failed, right? So
choices.
Yeah, it's all about choices. And I think we are all faced with choices every single day. And I think no matter what side of this defense you stand on politically, no matter what your values are, we're all human beings. And I think at the end of the day, we all have to have personal accountability for how we treat ourselves, how we treat other people, what kind of thing we're doing to give back in the world. And I know one of the things that you talk a lot about is purpose. I want to go back to that. And so many people think they're going to read a book and be like, I'm going to find my purpose in a book. Or they think that they're going to go to some seminar and they're going to find their purpose. But I believe, and you believe, that purpose comes from experience. So talk a bit about that.
That's a really good point. Purpose does come from experience. And to the previous point before that, look, you can get motivated at an event temporarily. You can get inspired at an event or from a book temporarily. But you're not going to find your purpose. You're not going to go like, oh, man, I'm going to be the next Tony Robbins. I know that's what I'm meant to do. It's sexy, so it looks like that. But do you know how many people Tony Robbins has impacted, number one? Do you know, in fact, I forgot, I'm Not Your Guru, his documentary. Have you seen that?
Yeah, on Netflix, yeah.
Yeah, and I think they talked about in that documentary that something like at an average Tony Robbins event, there's typically about 7 people who are there as a last-ditch attempt before they commit suicide.
Wow.
And one of the first things he says at his big live events are, hey, who's here kind of thinking like they're going to commit suicide if this 4 days doesn't work out for you in your favor and doesn't change your path? And hands will go up. Now, do you think that he's able to take those, and those are just the 7 people who admitted that they were there as a last-ditch attempt, right?
Yeah.
How many more are there?
Right.
And so what happens when someone goes to a Tony Robbins event and they raise their hand or they don't, and Tony talks to them, and while he's helped many of them change their mind, the reality is some people have still gone home and committed suicide.
Right.
The weight that Tony has to carry, well, it's not his fault, but the weight that he has to carry. Like when someone sees the best of Tony Robbins, understand that there's weight that he's carrying, that maybe your shoulders are not meant to carry that weight. Like he's willing to carry that weight. I'm willing to carry a certain amount of weight. Like I run this thing called The Project, and the weight of the project, the things that men tell me in the project in secrecy that I will take to my grave, never put in a book, I will have to carry that weight. So while everyone wants to run a men's event that's really cool in 75 hours and a Navy SEALs instructing and a Marine and blah, 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 understand the shit that I have to hear and air traffic control will keep me awake for weeks at a time after a typical project class. And so, but I know that's part of my purpose. So I'm going to your point is where purpose is concerned. At some point, you're going to realize that I'm either a person that's meant to serve, I'm a person that's meant to create a product, a thing. You'll kind of figure it out. Maybe you're meant to go towards restaurant. Maybe you're like, hey, look, I worked as a busboy, and then I worked in a coffee shop serving coffee, and then I worked at a fine dining restaurant as a server. Well, the fact that 3 of your 10 jobs were restaurant-based might be a clue that you're starting to fall in line with your purpose. Can you start digging? Maybe you're supposed to be a restaurant owner, where I'm supposed to be a stage speaker. No one is right. Someone once told me, this guy, he goes, because he went to Biola, same school my wife did, Bible Institute of Los Angeles. That's what Biola stands for. And he goes, I was going to be a preacher. I was like, wow. I'm like, man, that's the highest calling. Like, to spread the word of God. You were going to be a preacher? You went to Biola? You were going to be a preacher? That is the highest calling. He goes, but I'm in the financial industry. I'm like, wait, what? What do you mean? You've got a degree in Bible studies and theology, and you were going to be a preacher, but now you're in the financial industry? He goes, yep. He goes, do you know what the highest calling is? I go, explain. He goes, wherever your purpose lies. He goes, I found that I'm supposed to make families whole financially. And if I can do that, number one reason for divorce is what? Financial, right? Holy crap. He realized as he's going through theology school that my highest calling is to, because he came from a broken family that broke up because of money.
Right.
And so he realized my purpose is to save other families, not through here, but through there.
Yeah.
So most people just need to do the research on, like for me, I realized, okay, the physical change was great senior year of high school, but forget the physical change. I started making eye contact with people. I started opening up and talking. And I'm like, man, I would love to help men, women, children, anyone who is insecure, lacks confidence, be able to express themselves and make eye contact and feel secure and confident again. Fitness has got to be my path. Now, I thought I was just going to be a one-on-one personal trainer, but I had no idea that as a one-on-one personal trainer, just by changing their body like yours did, some confidence begins to get built. And as you build your confidence, your standards of expectations for yourself go up. And as standards of expectations go up, you don't let other people treat you like shit. And then all of a sudden you begin to, how you do anything is how you do everything, right? Yes. So you begin to all of a sudden care about, maybe I can make more money. If I can change my physical state, I can change my financial state. Well, if I can change that, I can change my mental vibration to a higher state of vibration. And I realized that my purpose wasn't just fitness, it was also changing their headspace and changing their belief system. And so this is the path I took. By opening up a franchise, people think they're signing up for a fitness program, and we go, surprise, fitness is just one of the 3 elements. It's fitness, nutrition, and mindset. Welcome to the Fit Body Bootcamp Global Group. It's a giant Facebook private group that we have where I'm constantly teaching mindset in there because that's the big, like the hinge that swings the biggest doors. You develop your purpose over time. Not enough people give it the time. They keep shifting to one thing. Well, Tony Robbins, I was at a Tony Robbins thing. I think I'm supposed to be a Tony Robbins. Oh shit, Doug does podcasts, and he was like, Doug, you're a beast at podcasts, bro. You've been in front of more people in such a short amount of time that are notable. Guess what? I can tell this is your path. You're a great interviewer. You really, you don't just hear, you listen, right? You are persistent in connecting with me and others. Those 3 things must happen for you to be good at podcasting. And you probably followed up with people and said, hey, you want to be a sponsor? You want to be a sponsor? And finally someone said yes. Yeah. So you got the persistence factor. So while they see on the surface that Doug is on Impact Theory and this and that and Jay Feruzza's show and you're here and then, they don't see how many no's you get. They don't see how the persistence that it takes. They don't see that you flew across the country to come out here during the COVID time, right, when most people wouldn't. Because as soon as I tell them, hey, I don't do Zoom podcasts, I only do in person, 95% go away. You were like, okay, so when can I come? Yeah. Right? So.
And that's, by the way, I get asked so many times how I've been able to make a lot of things happen. Like, I do whatever it takes because I know that this is like my calling and I want to be able, I'm feeling called to serve at a greater purpose. And I remember for me, when I was incarcerated and I started working out, it wasn't like I was sitting there in that moment, I'm going to be a trainer, I'm going to be a trainer. I was just like, I'm just trying to save my life. Right. I'm trying not to do drugs again. And I got out, and I ended up getting a job at a liquor store, believe it or not. Worked there for a year, and still was like into my own health and my own fitness. And then it wasn't until I'm like, wow, like fitness is powerful for me. I'm going to help other people, right? And that was a stepping stone. And I believe like purpose happens when you just make these small goals, you set and achieve them, and you're just like, all right, what's next? What's next? Oh, I can beat, addiction with fitness. What's next? I can change my nutrition. What's next? I can write a book. What's next? I can get on a podcast, and so on and so forth. I mean, the guy like myself, and I look back to the guy who was having panic attacks and afraid to ask a girl to a dance, afraid to be able to do a push-up, is speaking to the Clemson football team, or like I said on Impact Theory, doing these amazing things that I'm extremely proud of myself for. It's all because it's my purpose, right? And I remember we talked about Todd Durkin before the show, and I remember going to Todd's mentorship. I think it was like 2011, 2012, and I was like, oh, Todd trains Drew Brees. He's partnered with Under Armour. This guy knows his stuff about lunges and squats. I remember going there, man, and same kind of thing. Like people think they're going to go to Fit Body Boot Camp and just work out. He was like, all right, what are the 5 things you want to accomplish by the time you die? Like, what's your tombstone statement? I was just like, wait, what?
Wait, what? Exactly, right? Because Todd's a fitness guy,
yeah,
but
I'm like,
not really.
Yeah. And tying it all back into what I wanted to say is, I think you've continued to evolve. Fitness was the catalyst for you at Fit Body Boot Camp, and then you got into coaching other trainers, and then people saw how much of a established entrepreneur you were, and then you started attracting other people into your life that maybe weren't necessarily in the fitness space, that were in the coaching space. They're like, I want to build a coaching business. How can I do that? Then you build your own podcast, and the Project Man. And I think that's part of your purpose now, is like raising like men. You got a son now, Andrew, right? That's his name. Now so you got Project Man, which is more geared towards like men becoming men. Then you got Squire, which is like the boys, right? So was that part of inspired from like you having a son and being like, you know what, like I see a void here, or I want to make sure that my son is ready to face the world? Like, talk about that.
Yeah, so the project is exactly for, like you said, men who are entrepreneurs, married, have kids, and are trying to find balance, and they're suffering in silence, and they're going everything I went through as I described earlier, right? And it's like they need a rebirth, and they need to belong to a brotherhood of like-minded, high-speed people, dudes. And so that's the place to do it. But I realized, well, wait a minute. What if I could do something where if I do it right, 10 years from now, I'll never have to run a project class again? What if I can actually impact the youth and teach them core values and chivalry and how to be a protector and a provider, how to be a savage servant? And if we did that, if we created modern day knights from the beginning, so we call it the Squire program, right? And I got the idea from a book called Raising a Modern Day Knight that my wife's uncle gave to us when my wife was pregnant with Andrew. And dude, when I read it, I was like, holy crap, I need this book. And I'm in my late 20s, right? Like, I need this book. Right. And here I am supposed to teach this young dude who's going to pop out, like how to be chivalrous and how to be a gentleman, how to be a savage, but how to be a servant and how to protect and provide and have his own core values and have non-negotiables and have a moral compass. And I don't have any of this.
Right.
Doug, who's going to fucking teach me? Right? So I was like, all right, well, I got 9 months. Let's crank it up. I got 9 months to do it. And so as my son's growing up and I'm starting to teach this stuff, we were both learning it at the same time, because boys do need a rite of passage. They look up to older men, older boys as a rite of passage into manhood, and that doesn't exist anymore. And I said, if I'm the one who creates that, then I can bring all these dads who instinctively know, like, okay, I know my son needs some kind of rite of passage, he needs some kind of experience, he needs some kind of pouring into, but I don't know how to do this for myself. So we launched the Squire program literally 4 weeks ago. It took place this past weekend, sold it out, and I realized how much need there is to serve. Again, I'm so designed to serve, and I realize the people I want to serve are men who are either currently suffering in silence or are headed that way because they don't have any male positive influence in their life. Like, 50% of dads are absent because of divorce.
Right.
Half of the other 50% are there, but they're not there, if you know what I mean. They're absent out of their kids' lives, their sons' lives. And so I want to be able to pour into these men and these young men, and so that's why I created the Squire program. And so I don't, like, now if you asked me 2 years ago, like, hey, are you going to have this thing for men and for boys? I'm like, bro, what are you talking about? I'm growing my franchise. But as I plugged in the right leadership into my franchise, and as men continue to reach out to me, and after reading my book and going, dude, I want to put myself through these 6-week challenges like you're doing, When other people would reach out, women would reach out, I'm like, hey, figure out your challenge and do it. When men would reach out, I'm like, I know there's something I'm supposed to do to help them. Like, that's where you listen to your gut, and that's where the purpose begins to connect. Why is it that young men were reaching out, and I was like, I'm not interested in helping you, and you're in your 20s. But dudes in their like late 30s, 40s, and 50s, I'm like, damn. And they would open up in the DM. They'd be like, man, I've got a drinking problem. I got drug issues. I'm gambling, and I'm trying to hold my marriage together, and my wife doesn't respect me because I don't respect myself. And I was like, these guys are coming to me, and something inside me is saying, serve them.
Yeah.
You got to listen to that voice. But if you don't listen to the voice and you just go, who's doing what looks cool? Then I'm going to go, oh, Tony Robbins looks like he's doing something cool. Oh, Doug looks like he's doing something cool. And Jay Ferrugia's doing something cool. And I'm going to try and mimic them, and I can't. I could only authentically be me.
Yeah.
And that's what the project and the Squire program, Fit Body, True Lean. And if I start a business, I did. I started a business called High Tech Trainer, and I was like, I don't like this. Shut it down after 3 years.
Yeah.
You don't like it, shut it down. You don't have to be a handcuffed to a business or to a shitty relationship. Like, you're the CEO of your doggone life. You could hire a new team member, a new person in your life. You can promote, you can demote, you can fire. We just forget to do that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. We have to make the decisions that are best for us, not best for everybody else, but best for us. You know, I think you brought up like some really interesting points, and I know, like, the one thing I want to kind of put a bow on that with purpose that I think you do such a great job of saying is that, just imagine, like, if you were to do the thing you're doing and somebody would pay your bills for you, would you still do it for free? And if the answer is yes, keep doing it. That's your purpose. If the answer is no, don't, right? And I think so many people, they think they found something, but they truly haven't, right? They think that they've like found their purpose because Tony Robbins is doing something. They're like, oh, I'm gonna just start speaking on stage because Tony's doing it, right? Or because you're doing it, or because I'm doing podcasts and they're gonna do a podcast. But really, like, how do they really know if they truly liked it? They don't give it enough time. They don't like figure out if they actually are aligned with it.
Do you remember the first time you picked up a barbell to do a bench press?
Oh yeah.
How awkward that bar was.
My
like,
gosh.
there's no mind-muscle connection. You're flopping around everywhere. And now someone can blindfold you and tell you there's a bench press with plates and a bar there. And I bet you'd find the right plates and you'd know how to position yourself. You'd find the grooves on the bar, put your fingers in the right place, and you'd go right into the correct form. You've just done thousands of reps.
Yeah.
And everyone is afraid to do 1,000 reps. I don't know why that is, but going back to what you said, if I were to pay you to do something for free because you love it so much, if I paid for someone's lifestyle, ask yourself, what would I do? And see, people can come up with that answer quickly. Oh, I do X. Well, then do that until you can get paid for it. Be so good until someone wants to pay you for it. That means you got to do the reps.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be shitty at first. No one's going to pay you to do bench presses if you're shitty. Right. But you get really good, you're going to get sponsored, you're going to be on TV, you're going to make it to the Olympics, you're going to get paid an obscene amount of money to bench.
Yeah. And, you know, the funny thing is that, you know, you've run a ton of masterminds, and I've been involved in masterminds, been at events. Like, how common is it, you know, I'm just saying this, it's so common that when someone's having problems in their business, it's not their business, it's them. It's something personally they're battling, right? They got addiction issues, they got self-esteem, they got anger, they got trauma, and it's bleeding into other areas of their life, right? And bringing that down. Awesome. And so I think, you know, you've definitely obviously continued to find your purpose, and you know, I'm really appreciative of you taking the time. There's not many people I would fly 3,000 miles to get up at, you know, my flight was at like 6:30 this morning out of Baltimore to come interview.
Dude, I appreciate you doing this.
And you're one of them. And I just want to remind people, if you want something in life, like, you got to be able to say yes. And it's not the ready, aim, fire. It's ready, fire, aim. It's like when Bedros was literally like, I sent him a nice voice message. I was like, I love the interview. He's like, I'm not doing it on Zoom. You're going to have to come here. And I was like, when? I didn't know what my calendar looked like, and I just was like, you know what, I got to make this happen, because not only has he inspired me as a trainer, an entrepreneur, a dad, as a man, podcaster, I just know that, you know, this is part of what you have to do to make things work. You got to take risks, you got to take chances. And
by the way, everything you do is going to be hard.
Yeah.
Everything you do is going to be hard. Like, there is no one path to easy money. I remember when 16 months ago we started True Lean, the supplement company. One of my team members were like, man, this is going to be easy money because there's no Federal Trade Commission like there is with the franchise. There's no franchisees where you have to be I'm business partners with 600 people, right? 600 locations, 600 people. And people have emotions and feelings and spouses and issues. And He goes, dude, we're starting a supplement company. They don't like our protein flavor. Get out. Go buy another flavor. I'm like, dude, it's going to be just as hard.
Yeah.
Because there's more supplement companies out there than there are franchises. So while it's an easier, less friction business with the client and the business and the client and the customer, there's just more competition.
Yeah.
Once you accept that everything you do in life is going to be hard, you're going to have to wake up at the shittiest hours and then fly to the West Coast and possibly get yelled at by a flight attendant for put on your mask, sir, right on your way back home. Then you go, all right, I got this.
Yeah.
I got this.
When you face adversity and you get through it in a healthy way and you just keep fighting, you get better and you get better and better. And Bedros' story is the epitome of that. From everything he battled as an entrepreneur, as a kid, in business, even during COVID, how he's pivoted. I mean, for him to be able to get through what he's gone through is absolutely remarkable. And once again, I thank you for your time today, my friend.
Appreciate it, man.
And for those listening or watching, however you're consuming this, you're going to get so much information out of this. And all that I ask is that you give Bedros a follow at Bedros Keuilian, right, on Instagram, bedroskeuilian.com, Fit Body Bootcamp. He's got a lot of amazing things happening. He's built quite the empire. And once again, thank you again for following and for listening or watching or however you're doing this. And all that I ask personally for my show is if this touched your heart, if you got some nuggets out of this, which hopefully you did, please leave us a review and reach out and let us know what you thought. And once again, I thank you for listening to this episode of The Adversity Advantage. I'm your host, Doug Bopst. We'll see you next time.